In part 5 of our series on SEO fundamentals and best practices, we're going to look at some domain optimization fundamentals and best practices. We'll look at some ideas around exact match domains and best practices, partial match domains, some age implications and how the age of a website may impact your search engine rankings, and being accessible to the search engines, the idea of having your domain indexed properly, and some tools we can look at there for that. So the first best practice I want to cover is when you're getting your domain, you don't really want to use dashes in the domain. One dash you might get away with, but years ago spammers used double dash domains, and therefore it kind of did detriment to the entire credibility of dashed domains. So there are some good examples. Digital-photography-school is really a great website, but not such a great URL. You know, if I was their consultant, I would say probably want to think about a 301, maybe do a redirect at some point so you have a little bit more credible domain. It's just interpreted with less credibility by the search engines and most likely by users as well. The next thing is a keyword in your domain. Obviously, exact match domains are good at the .com level, and we'll talk about those in a minute, but when you have your keyword in those domains, it shows up in bold in the search engines, and you get a little bit better click-through rate. You can see where fishing charters was the query, and where those URLs are showing up in bold for the exact match or even the partial match version of my query. So when you do think about getting an exact match domain, if you go, we want to try to buy the .com for our two-word phrase like Miami Fishing or fishingcharters.com, it encourages people to use that as the anchor text, to use that keyword anchor text, which there's some value in that, but you don't want to get carried away. If all of your links say your targeted anchor text, you can be considered over-optimized by the search engine. So you really need to make sure to get some branded anchor text, to get some varied anchor text, and not just that exact match if you do have that exact match domains. There's a slew of potential problems that come with an exact match domain, but there's also some benefits that go along with having those keywords in your domain as well. Mainly that when people link to you, they are going to use that targeted anchor text instead of just generic anchor text. Now, best practices when it comes to over-optimization, and this has only been in the last couple of years that search engines said we're going to penalize sites for being, air quotes, over-optimized. If you're reaching that percentage of 30, 40, 50, 80% of your anchor text says one specific thing, like you can see here, I checked with Ahrefs on one of the sites that incurred a filter/banning. We had lots of site-wide links with targeted commercial anchor text, and we kind of went over that threshold. This was at about 50%, and there's no exact percentage, but if you do have those site-wide links, you can potentially run into problems there. So if you're concerned that you may have too many of one link type, like site-wide links or anchor text in your links that's too commercial or not varied enough, you can check this out with Ahrefs. A really great little tool. They have some free tools available that you can check the percentages on what your anchor text is inbound to a page or to your site. The overall hierarchy with regards to domain names and exact matches, if you're picking out your domain and you don't have a domain, you're starting a new site, some best practices to keep in mind. The best keywords are going to be one-word.coms. Two-word.coms are kind of in that second tier. One-word.net and .org are still in that area. I don't do the .net, .info, whatever other top-level domain extensions are out there. They just really haven't proved to be that effective overall. Stick to .com, .net, .org. 1 to 2 words is kind of in that second tier, and you can see when you get into 3, 4 word phrases for .net, .org, that's kind of the last tier, and those are even pushing it, and .mobi, .info domains, just kind of stay away from those. Definitely not worth it most times. So another good best practice these days is partial match domains. Partial match domains, you can include one keyword, something like Yeti Cycles or Yeti Coolers or Double D Charters. These are good examples of having one of the major keywords of what they do in the phrase as well as the brand name, and good partial match domains to get a little bit of anchor text, but to also get your branded phrases and branded anchor text for good balance. Because you can run into those potential filters with exact match domains if you are using too much anchor text. The age of the EMD or exact match domain is also going to play a role. If it's been around for 10 years, you probably have a better chance than starting up a new exact match domain these days, and we'll talk about age a little bit later as well. The history of the EMD, if you buy a website that's two-word.com and it had some history or somebody did something mischievous on it earlier, you need to be careful of that sort of thing. And you can test that with something like the Penguin tool. That's PANGUIN tool.com. And you import your Google Analytics into that, and it'll show you if there's any drops in traffic or penalties potentially associated with the site. The positive aspects of exact match domains: it's great for long tail traffic, it's good for startups, it's great in local search, as in the example of Miami fishing. Your geovertical plus your keyword can be very effective if you have the .com. It's easier to get those targeted links and mentioned, but it is a generic kind of brand, and there is that higher chance for air quotes over optimization. There's not that many, so they can be expensive to buy. You're paying a premium for those really high quality exact match domains most of the time, and it can create that brand confusion and limits future expansion. By not being a brand, it's you tie yourself into that one exact keyword. So overall, domain name best practices, I'd say go with a partial match where you can brand plus your keyword. Don't use any dashes. You can do up to one if it's an old site that you've had for a long time. Don't bother trying to redirect it. If you're using an exact match domain, try to get that branded anchor text when you can, so that you're not getting too much commercial or targeted anchor text. Up to 3 words max. I wouldn't go beyond that. 3 words is even kind of pushing it now, but 2 words is still acceptable when it comes to exact match, and avoid those dashes for credibility concerns. The next area I want to talk about is the age and history of the domain. I would say, by my speculation, it was about the Florida update where Google really started tracking things effectively with regards to age. Storage was cheaper, and they were able to store more information and track more information on websites. So the age of a website, the age of a web page, and the age of a link can all be potential factors. Not really positive or negative one way or the other, but they are a factor. So all else being equal, an older site probably has more value than a younger website. Now, that's not always the case, certainly, but all else being equal, it takes a while for a site to mature and get links and have people link to it, and there's trust and authority around older websites. So if you have a site that's a decade old and people have been linking to it for years, those links are aged, like my analogy here of a good bottle of wine in your cellar. So if you have old links, an old website, it's always going to perform pretty well. Obviously, you want things to update this and make your site, into the modern age here if you do have that old site, but you want to take a look at when a site was created. And you can do that with just looking at the whois record, like whois.sc or domain tools, and you can see I can pull up IBM, and it was one of the first sites on the web, and we can see that went way back. Domain tools only goes back about 10 years, I think, but the web obviously goes back a little bit further than that. So there are some domain age implications, and age can have an impact on a web page, the domain as a whole, and links. So this is a good example of where this particular factor kind of transcends all those different dimensions and plays a role in each of those: off-site, on the page, and on the site. So the older websites are going to have more inherent trust. The newer pages can potentially rank well, but a new page on an old website will probably rank better than a new page on a new website, again, all else being equal. The age of a link can have some impact. When it's first put up, it's not completely matured, let's say, and then it starts to incur the whole value the longer that it's been up. They sometimes take a little bit of time to pass value, and certainly they have to get indexed by the search engines. If somebody links to your site, the search engines have to see that first and then see that they're linking to your site. And then when they see that a couple times, you'll receive the full value of that link. You also have to watch out with age and kind of the history of the domain for penalties on existing sites if you do go out and try to buy a domain name aftermarket, or do try to purchase a website to expand your business or something like that. You need to check for potential filters, penalties, any issues with the domain based on the previous owners, because there is a history associated with that website. The next area I want to touch upon briefly is domain indexation. Most importantly, a site has to be accessible for a spider to crawl the site. And based on your link equity, meaning the quality and quantity of the people linking to your domain, you're going to have a limited amount of crawl cycles. Google's going to send the spider into your website, and the first thing they're going to do is look for a sitemap and look at your homepage most times. Or they'll follow a link into a subpage on your website, and that's where they start crawling your site. That spider may come and hit 10 pages, it may hit 100 pages, it may hit 1,000 or 10,000 pages, depending on your link equity. If you're a large site with a lot of link equity, you're going to have more crawl cycles. But you don't want to waste these crawl cycles with duplicate content. The valuable content should always be well linked from the sitemap and from the home page, and the entire site needs to be accessible. You can test this with something like Screaming Frog, Xenu Link Sleuth. Internet Marketing Ninjas has a sitemap tool that crawls just from the web. There's several tools that will do this. Screaming Frog is probably one of my favorite tools for this type of task. As you can see, it offers a variety of other information as well. We can see status codes, we can see all the URLs that are indexed within our site, we can see page titles and meta description. This is very handy for creating that information architecture in a large spreadsheet if you do have a large site as well. You can also see some of the crawl errors and fetch as Google within Google Webmaster Tools. You can set parameters, you can set some other things within that crawl section, but most importantly, we just want to look for errors and make sure that there's nothing keeping Google from getting to the pages we want them to get to. The other concept that's very important is this idea of crawl cycles and how they're limited based on your link equity. If you have 1,000 links versus 10,000 links versus 10 links, you may get indexed 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times, and you don't want to waste those crawl cycles with things like duplicate content or orphan pages. You want to make sure Google's getting to your important new content and the things that are high in your architecture, and that they can see the virtual information architecture the way that you intend it for your users as well. So there's a handful of factors that impact how Google gets through your site and where they crawl, your links internal to subpages, your sitemap, your internal linking. All of these kind of come together to form that information architecture, internal linking, and help with the indexation of your website. It's one of the most important aspects of SEO, only because if you don't have that content indexed, there's certainly no way that you can have it rank. And what you're pointing to with your internal anchor text shows Google what level of the website they are at. Is it first tier, is it second tier, is it third tier, and gives signals about what that content is about. So you don't want to overuse those keywords and link 10 keywords deep in anchor text from your footer, but you do want to use those strategically throughout your site where it makes the most sense. It's going to be used by Googlebot to find the other pages of the website when you link internally like this, and planning that internal architecture is so important, and that's why we included it as a best practice for the domain dimension. So overall, the things to keep in mind here is that the site must be accessible. You can run a test spider like Xenu or Internet Marketing Ninjas or my favorite Screaming Frog, and these crawl cycles are going to be based on the amount of link equity that your site has. The new content should be showcased. You want to link to your blog or to, in our case, the fishing reports from our homepage so that new content gets indexed. And that valuable and new content should be well linked throughout the site, from the sitemap, from the homepage, from any internal pages where it makes sense. So we covered some ideas for domain level optimization, best practices. We looked at exact match domains a little bit, some of the age implications around websites and domains, and some of the basic concepts on domain indexation. In the next section, we're going to look at breadcrumbs, canonicalization, and sitemaps.